While recording the most recent word of the week, 3 disqualifiers, I referred to the problem of a gospel of Jesus plus some performance on your behalf that rounds out the gospel. That Paul was counseling Titus to select elders to guard against the Jesus plus gospel. And while I was recording that, I could hear in my mind, in the back of my head, I could hear somebody saying, oh, but James says, faith without works is dead. And I said, okay, I know it's coming. Let me take a look at the passage and see exactly what James said so we can talk about it. So that's what we're doing today. Let's start out with the context in James chapter 2. This is verses 14 through 16 from the ESV. What good is it, my brothers, if someone says he has faith but does not have works? Can that faith save him? If a brother or sister is poorly clothed and lacking in daily food, and one of you says to them, go in peace, be warmed and filled, without giving them the things needed for the body, what good is that? So there's the context. It sets us up for the key verse, verse 17. So also, faith by itself, if it does not have works, is dead. That's James 2:17 from the ESV. The verse has 3 distinct parts. We're going to look at each one of them. Before we do that, I want to point out that many English translations, perhaps a majority of English translations, take part of the 3rd clause of the verse and move it up to the 1st clause. And we'll take a good look at that when we get to the end of our exploration today. Why do they do that? Because it makes it smoother. For English, it sounds more smooth. The problem is it may not best convey James's intent. But again, we'll pick that up when we get toward the end. Let's break it down. We'll start with the 1st clause. Houtos kai he pistis. So houtos is so or likewise, and then when we pair it with the kai, we get so also or likewise also, he pistis, faith. So when we get that houtos in there, it's introducing a simile, right? So also, fill in the blank. This is like that. So it introduces the simile. Then the 2nd clause tells us the subject of the simile is faith. The 2nd clause qualifies this noun faith and tells us something about it. It answers the question, what kind of faith? Let's look at the 2nd clause. Eon me eke erga. So eon, if in the subjunctive, in any of the non-indicative moods, eon is our interrogative. If me eke, it should not have in the subjunctive mood, so from echo, I have, if it should not have, erga, works. The object of the verb here is works. The subject of the verb is from the previous clause, faith. So likewise also, faith, if it should not have works, what kind of faith? A faith that doesn't have works. This is either a 3rd class condition or a 5th class condition. There's no need for us to split hairs over it, because the 5th class condition is generally accepted as being kind of a subset of the 3rd class, because they're very, very similar. What is the big difference? The big difference is in the 5th class condition, the fulfillment of the condition is in present time. Not necessarily present tense, but in the present time. So we will see that when we get to the 3rd clause of our verse. But it's either a 3rd class condition dealing with a hypothetical or a possibility where the fulfillment tends to be in the future, or it's a 5th class condition where the fulfillment of the condition is in the present time. Let's go on to our 3rd clause and see what we find. Necra estin kath heautein. So necra, dead, estin, he, she, or it is, and then kath heautein, according to itself, for itself, by itself, And in this case, you'll notice on the slide, I have added in the parentheses being. Why? Because the function of heautein here, the reflexive pronoun, is to link the subject to the action of the verb. What is the verb here? The verb is estin. It is. So faith is dead by itself, being by itself. Faith being by itself is dead. That's our verb, right? Is. So it is dead when? It is dead now in the present. So I think the odds are this is a fifth class condition because the fulfillment is in the present. Faith, what kind of faith? Faith, if it doesn't have works, if it should not have works, that's the condition, right? That kind of faith is dead by itself. Well, there we get the great question. By itself in what regard? That reflexive pronoun is telling us a faith that is in isolation, being alone, apart from having those works, having deeds, is dead. Its condition is dead. Such a faith is dead, being by itself. Not having works is the condition that leaves it by itself. It's a faith that has no application. It's a faith that has no meaning in life or in reality, in praxis, right? There's nothing there. So, if it's a faith that neither prompts action nor influences actions, then it's faith in a vacuum. It's a conceptual faith. It's not a faith that has any bearing on life. And James says such a faith is like wishing well to people but not acting for their well-being. Likewise also, so also, faith, if it doesn't go into action, if it's by itself, if it's isolated, and doesn't do something about the world it encounters, is already dead. Not, if it were in the third class, we would say, faith that should not have works shall die, shall perish. But no, he says, fifth class condition, probably, here in the present is dead. There's no life in that faith. That faith in a vacuum has no life, has no meaning. So let's go back and take a look at the verse from the ESV again. So also faith by itself, if it does not have works, is dead. So remember I mentioned that a lot of translation moved the reflexive pronoun, the by itself, from the end of the verse, from the third clause, up into the beginning of the verse in the first clause, and paired it together with the subject. So hey pistis is the subject, and we've placed the reflexive pronoun here in the ESV and many other versions with the subject. That's smoother in English. Faith by itself, if it should not have works, is dead. That makes good sense to us, right? And it's not wrong, but it sort of takes away from the way James tied these things together. He didn't tie it together with the subject. He tied it together with the outcome of the condition, which is being by itself, it's dead. He wanted his audience, based on his sentence structure, to tie the notion of a worksless faith with death. It's dead. That kind of faith is dead. Not will be dead, not might be dead, not could be dead. It is dead because it's isolated from praxis. It doesn't have a connection to the life that you live. So that kind of faith being dead is a great message because it's not at all in conflict with Paul writing to Titus saying it's important for people to understand that it's not their faith in Christ plus a kosher diet that's going to save them. It's not their faith in Christ plus circumcision or plus attending the Day of Atonement. It's not those things. But James comes along, and I think Paul would greatly agree, comes along and says, A faith that doesn't affect the way you act is already dead. That's not a legitimate faith. A saving, enlivening, vivifying faith isn't going to leave you with no effect on your day-to-day life. Pretty good stuff, pretty good stuff. So the reflexive pronoun sort of ramps up the horsepower of the result of the condition, the fulfillment of the condition. That's why James put it near the end. It's fine that many translations transport it to the beginning because that makes sense to our English ears. So likewise, faith by itself, not having works, is dead. That makes sense to our English ears. But let's think about it the way James put it. So likewise, faith, if it should not have works, is dead by itself, by virtue of not being accompanied by some sort of a practical effect. Magnificent stuff. Hope that was good for you. If it was, like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. And until next time, Kar Sky Reina Humin, grace and peace to you.